As you may know, I am struggling with the flexible assemblies, and this video is to demonstrate the most obvious bug of the obvious bugs that can be related to the flexibility. In this video you will see how the component is torn apart the second it is made flexible, although there are no constraints that would force it to do so. But before, I will just explain you a little bit about the assembly. So I have built this assembly from scratch using the suggestions from this presentation that one of the Autodesk employees, Denis Osadnik, sent me in relation to our conversation and support cases that basically are about problems with flexibility. So I have followed every suggestion that is here building this assembly, and now just a quick tour through the assembly. So as you can see here, we have the casing, we have maybe we switch to master. We have a casing, we have this stopper, we have a few inner elements. So if we examine the assembly from inside, we see that we have a casing, we have a stopper, we have a support plate that forms the support for the base. We have the guiding, and we have the spring, let's say, element that has a threaded nut and directly supports the extending piece. And we have some components of bolts. So in this assembly, I will try to make this stopper elements flexible, so the head can tilt on the spherical bearing that I have here. And if we examine the stopper element, we see that it has a master positional representation, of course. It has few positional representations on the way, and in the end it has a positional representation foreseen to use with a flexibility. And this element is constrained, so it basically consists of three parts: the bottom part that is fixed, the spherical bearing that allow movement of the upper part in relation to the bottom part, and it is constrained, so the bearing is constrained to the lower part and the upper part is constrained to the bearing. So there are no constraints that would constrain upper part to the lower part. And if we examine the positional representations, we see first just one more thing. So I have enable relationship redundancy analysis turned on, and as you can see here, I have no redundant constraints. What you can also see here, I have no 3 degrees of freedom. So the assembly is therefore constrained properly. If we go to the angle 5, we will be dealing with the tilt angle. Tilt angle is responsible for setting the tilt of the head in relation to the bottom part. In the angle 5.3 degrees, the tilt angle is set to 5.3 degrees, and the spherical bearing is set to its flexible positional representation tilt, and it is made flexible. So in straight, the tilt angle is set to 0. In assembly, we see the assembly, and flex tilt angle, we have a assembly that is let's say free to tilt in the range available for the bearing. So the assembly is perfectly fine if constraints and relationships between the elements are considered. So now I will close the assembly, and we are now back in the assembly that uses this stopper element. I will hide that. So in this assembly there are no constraints that are applied to the head of the stopper or to the spherical bearing of the stopper itself. The stopper only has constraints that are either with the origin planes of the assembly, or they are with the elements of the bottom part of the stopper, and as you may recall, this bottom part is grounded in the stopper assembly itself, so this one. So now if we go to the positional representations in the top level that is designed to be used as flexible one, and if we now examine the positional representation of the stopper, we see that it is set into the flexed angle tilt in YZ positional representation of the stopper. And to make this assembly flexible in, let's say, in for the future use, I need to make this component, this subassembly, flexible, so the tilt of the head is enabled. Now you have to observe what is happening when I select the flexibility for the override for this positional representation. As you will see in 1 second, the head, the stopper, will be torn apart by the constraint solver and forced into the position that is clearly against the constraints that are defined within this component. And we have instantly the head torn apart from the component, and we are getting that the error message of some constraints that are not consistent with the positional representations. Of course they are not consistent because the constraint solver did it bad, did it wrong. So this is the obvious bug that is in inventor, and could you please finally fix that, because it is not usable at all. If I cannot even make the component flexible without any constraints, and it is torn apart by the constraint solver, just a ridiculous solution.